Katie Kutcher says, does he, that would be Father Blind, have any advice on how a young mother can teach her children how to think properly to use these tools of faith and reason? First of all, I didn't handpick these questions. This is just how awesome my patrons are.
That's sweet,
They're just
man.
really intelligent and in-tune people.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
So yeah, I have sisters and they have children, and I think about this when I visit them. Best thing is, so a lot of the stuff that your children are going to be given, depending on their schooling, is materialistic or reductionistic or scientistic or naturalistic. So they're going to imbibe those things unless you anticipate it, get out ahead of it. So I know that, for instance, there's a kind of project in the works right now to write textbooks for science classes. It's this, like, there's a John Templeton grant for this thing called Thomistic Evolution, and then they've got this kind of side project, and I don't actually know how it's developing at this stage, but that there are plans to kind of get out ahead of this. But, you know, your children will be almost automatically influenced by the modernity in which they live. We're all products of our time to a certain extent. But by anticipating that and equipping your kids for it, you can help them to process their experience more fruitfully. That is to say, they get their first introduction in the home, and those introductions mean something, and they stick, and they're super formative. So that way your kid can go into school, and they'll hear something, and they'll recognize it by the kind of sense of the faith that they've imbibed, you know, at the hearth, and they'll have the equipment to say, that doesn't sound right, I'm going to go and consult my parents, right? So yeah, I mean, concrete advice. I stink at concrete things, I stink at practical things. How to properly use the tools of faith and reason. I think just like emphasizing the fact that we need never fear the truth. That's one thing you can impart to your kids at a young age, is that wherever the truth is found, it's addressed to us for our knowing. So it's not that like faith is against reason or reason is against faith, but rather that we have access to reality, some of which we have access to naturally, some of which we have access to supernaturally. And that in both of those dimensions, we're really being faithful to, you know, our call to know and to love. So if something comes from science and it sounds like it's in conflict with faith, we needn't fear, because we believe that God speaks truly, else there's nothing true. So either we don't understand the faith well, or this is an untested hypothesis, but we need to do the work of finding out how they're symphonic, because that work can be done. Now, with other faith traditions, that's not necessarily the case, so you can't have that kind of confidence. But you can teach your kids that they have nothing to fear. There's like no knowledge that they need shun, unless it's like idle curiositas, you know, it's just like, if it's just like knowledge thrill-seeking, maybe it's not worth our time. But whenever these things come up, we can find a way through, and we can actually have our minds conform to what is, because they're made for that.
How important is the reading of good literature in the home to help our children learn to love the good and think well?
I think it's very important. So especially like before the age of, 20, I don't think there's much sense in like reading philosophy or like theology, not because those things aren't good, but because, you know, just when you're young, you don't have the capacity to appreciate them. And I say this of myself, like I was introduced to some things just too early, and I developed a distaste for them because I wasn't equipped to actually, to like handle it. So I would say, to introduce age-appropriate literature is the best introduction to philosophy and theology, because what does literature do? It spins out the human condition, it gives you access to a wider human experience, and then it like represents your humanity to you. So, you know, prudence is something that's, you know, it hinges on having a memory of the past, it hinges on being docile to your, you know, the good counsel of your forebears, but it means you need to have experienced life in order to be prudent, in order to find a way through all of these different clamorous goods. And so, you know, if like you grow up in a suburb north of Atlanta, you might not have a wide experience of like Yankees, for instance. But you can read those kind of things in literature and have a broader understanding of what it means to be a human being, which deepens your appreciation of the real and sets you up for a more fruitful engagement later on in life. So like when I read like Russian literature, for instance, on the one hand, I'm like, this is awesome. On the other hand, I'm like, do I share the same humanity as these people? You know, because it's like, these people are like raving at like 11 p.m.
What's your favorite Russian novel? Because I just read Turgenev's Fathers and Sons.
Nice.
Crime and Punishment's my favorite.
Crime and Punishment, I think. That's the one that makes most sense to me in the sense of like, the redemption narrative is the least ambiguous.
It's so beautiful.
It is.
What's crazy, speaking about this faith and reason, you notice with Raskolnikov that he does awful things when he thinks. You notice this?
Yeah.
So he acts spontaneously from the good of his heart, like that girl who he could tell was about to be ravaged, or he leaves money for the husband who'd been run over by the horse. And then he walks down the stairs and thinks, why the bloody hell did I do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that there's a kind of spontaneous inclination.
Yeah. Which is what the name Raskolnikov means, actually. It's a split, like a schism. That's where the word comes from.
Wow.
Anyway, I love that. What's your favorite book?
So, The Gospel of John. That's not just an
I meant Russian literature, but that's okay.
Yeah, my bad. Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
I haven't read many. I've read that and The Idiot and The Brothers K.
I'm just getting into The Idiot.
Nice.
My understanding is that it was written after Crime and Punishment, and it was meant to be kind of like a mirror image of Raskolnikov.
Oh.
So if Raskolnikov is the deep, dark, brooding, awful one, the idiot is the most like Christ that a man could be.
Which is heartbreaking because he seems like the most naive.
Yeah.
But his innocence is a kind of like foil for everyone else's corruption. That's true also of Alyosha, I think, in The Brothers K.
Yeah. Why don't you like The Brothers K more than Crime and Punishment?
Just because I didn't understand it.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, like...
You must have read it a long time ago.
I read it
Yesterday.
not that long ago. I read it like 8 years ago.
The reason I like Crime and Punishment more than The Brothers K, sorry to go off on this.
No, let's do it.
But I don't care because I love the Russian authors, is because I love The Brothers Karamazov. It is absolutely glorious and led me to tears on many times. But there's so many side stories and things that you feel like this could have been removed from the novel, and the novel would have been poorer, but it would have been no less sort of...
Narratively compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a good
anyway.
theory or philosophy as to how best to weave a narrative, but...
And then what about Tolstoy? You read much Tolstoy?
None.
I have, but I love him. He's brilliant. He's got a really great little book called The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is all about the life of a civil servant who wasted his life kind of running after honors and money, and then he dies. And it's a slow death, and his family just think he's a pain in the ass. He's complaining about his pain, and they're like, just shut the... And so he's just slowly dying, and no one seems to care, except one of his servants who shows love to him. And at the last moment, he realizes there's still time to live a good life, and he chooses to love. It is a beautiful meditation on death, and you could read it in a couple of hours. Okay. Death of Ivan Ilyich. Go and read it.
Boom. You have compelled me. I'm drawn.
Chekhov?
What have I read?
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop this, but Chekhov's great. What does he write there about
Dead Souls? I read some of Dead Souls and then some short stories.
Yeah, the one about the fiddle. What's that one?
I don't know.
Anyway.
My retention for this is...
But we should read literature to our kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm reading Lord of the Rings to my kids right now, and they love it.
I just listened to a lecture on Tolkien.
Did you?
On the TI podcast.
Tell them.
Yeah, there's a podcast for the Temistic Institute.
There, red light, go.
There's a podcast. It's for the Temistic Institute. I work for the Temistic Institute, and we have these lectures on different college campuses, and then we record them and then just put them on a podcast. So the target audience is an undergraduate, and the idea is to engage with like philosophy, theology, literature, art, music, like all these kinds of things in a way that's awesome. So
I should say the audience is intelligent undergraduate. Can we say that? Because often I'm listening being like, I totally get this. This is super simple.
Yeah. I mean, some people pitch it higher, some people pitch it lower.
Right.
And then sometimes we have conferences which are like for academic types, and you're listening to like sweet talk about Tolkien, sweet talk about, I don't know, like some visual artist and theology, and then you hear like 5 straight lectures about faith and science that are pitched at a pretty high level. You're like, wow, this is intense. So yeah, different registers.
Now I just want to get this, I want people to be able to check this out. Yeah, Rothschild's Fiddle. That's a story you could read in an hour, and it is glorious. Anyway, by Chekhov. Yo, thanks for watching. You can watch the entire episode on YouTube if you want. You can listen to it at The Matt Fradd Show by subscribing on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And feel free to support me, patreon.com/MattFradd.